Veteran Xen's violet eyes gleamed with irritation as he leaned forward in his chair, his posture rigid and impatient. The ornate chamber of the Galactic Council was silent, save for the low hum of energy coursing through the room's walls. He didn't have time for the ramblings of an old soldier, yet here he was, listening to the veteran whose voice carried the weight of 1,000 battles. "I'm here to warn you, General," the veteran began, his tone steady but laced with a weariness born of experience. The lines on his face seemed etched with the history of wars past. "I've faced the humans before. It was no ordinary battle." Xen's jaw tightened as he suppressed a sigh. The humans, primitive, chaotic beings who had only recently entered interstellar affairs, had become the subject of endless debates in the Council. Some saw them as an insignificant anomaly. Others, like this veteran, treated them as if they were some mythical threat. The general had little patience for theatrics. "They were outnumbered," the veteran continued. "Their ships were inferior to ours, their weapons archaic. On paper they should have been wiped out within hours. And yet we lost." The statement hung heavy in the air. Xen's irritation gave way to a flicker of curiosity. "Lost?" he repeated, the skepticism in his voice clear. "A skirmish, perhaps. But no battle with humans could truly test the might of the Empire." The veteran's gaze sharpened. "You underestimate them, as I once did. That is precisely why I'm here, to ensure you don't make the same mistake. When I say lost, I don't just mean tactically. We lost something far greater, our confidence, our unity, and for many, our sanity." Xen leaned back, the veteran's words beginning to chip away at his initial dismissal. The old soldier's voice carried a gravity that was difficult to ignore, even for someone as proud as Xen. "Humans," the veteran said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "are not bound by the same rules as we are. Their strength is not in their weapons or numbers but in their unpredictability. They don't fight like we do, with strategy and precision. They fight like cornered beasts, with an ingenuity and desperation that defies logic." The general's expression hardened. "Desperation is no match for discipline. A rabid animal may lash out, but it cannot outlast a trained warrior." The veteran shook his head, a faint smirk crossing his face as if he had anticipated Xen's response. "That's what I thought too. Until I saw it. Until I felt it." His voice grew distant, as though he were reliving the events he described. "It was supposed to be a routine operation. A small human colony on the outskirts of their territory. Our orders were simple: subjugate and pacify. We entered their system with a fleet twice their size, our ships bristling with technology that outclassed theirs in every way." The veteran's eyes seemed to darken as he continued. "At first, it was easy. We destroyed their outer defenses in hours, scattered their fleets like leaves in a storm. But then, they adapted. It was as if they were learning from us, analyzing our every move and countering with a ferocity we hadn't expected. Their ships, though crude, began to maneuver in ways that defied our simulations. Their tactics became erratic, unpredictable. We couldn't anticipate their next move, and that chaos spread through our ranks like a virus." Xen frowned, his skepticism giving way to unease. "What are you suggesting? That they possess some form of advanced intelligence we've overlooked?" The veteran's laugh was humorless. "Advanced intelligence? No. What they possess is far more dangerous. It's their ability to think outside the bounds of logic, to embrace the irrational. They exploit their weaknesses, turning them into strengths. They use what they have, no matter how insignificant, to devastating effect." He paused, his gaze fixed on Xen. "Do you know what it feels like to be hunted, General? To be outmaneuvered by a species you believed inferior? To watch as your comrades, elite warriors of the Empire, fall apart because they can't comprehend what they're facing? I do. I've seen it." Xen's hands tightened into fists. He didn't like where this was going. The Empire had always been a beacon of order and control, its military the pinnacle of discipline and strategy. To hear this veteran describe a human victory as if it were inevitable was almost insulting. "Enough," Xen said, his voice sharp. "You're painting them as some invincible force. If they were truly as dangerous as you claim, they would have conquered the galaxy by now. Yet here we are, still standing, still ruling. The veteran met his glare without flinching. They don't seek conquest, General. That's what makes them different. They fight only when they must, and when they do, they fight as if they have nothing to lose. That is what makes them dangerous. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Xen could feel the eyes of the council on him, waiting for his response. He hated the uncertainty creeping into his mind, the cracks forming in his confidence. You speak of humans as if they are some mythical threat, Xen said finally, his voice colder now. But myths are just that, stories told to inspire fear. The Empire does not bow to fear. We conquer it. The veteran's expression softened, but there was no resignation in his eyes. You don't have to believe me, General. But heed my warning. If you proceed down this path, you will learn the truth the hard way. And by then, it will be too late. Xen stood abruptly, his patience at its limit. Your words are noted, veteran. But the Empire does not cower before primitives. This meeting is adjourned. As the council began to disperse, the veteran remained seated, his gaze lingering on Xen. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet resolve. You'll remember this conversation, General. When the time comes, you'll remember. General Xen regarded the veteran's words with thinly veiled disdain, his mind working to counter the weight of the warning just delivered. The Galactic Empire had not thrived for millennia by succumbing to fears of lesser species. Humans, with their fragmented systems and crude technologies, were no match for the disciplined and advanced forces at his command. His voice carried an air of finality as he addressed the council. The Empire does not falter because of anecdotal accounts of defeat. We are built on strategy, precision, and overwhelming power. A single veteran's experience does not dictate policy. Some members of the council murmured in agreement. They represented factions aligned with Xen's ideology, unwavering belief in the Empire's supremacy. Others, however, remained silent, their expressions reflecting a quiet unease. Among them were voices not yet willing to dismiss the veteran outright. The tension in the room thickened as Xen's words hung in the air. A council elder, her voice steady and deliberate, broke the silence. General, the Empire's strength is unquestionable, but strength does not equate to invincibility. Our history teaches us that arrogance has been the downfall of many who thought themselves untouchable. The veteran's testimony deserves scrutiny, not dismissal. Xen's eyes narrowed, but he held his tongue. The elder's words struck at the core of his argument, and he could not appear dismissive without undermining his own credibility. He chose instead to redirect the focus. If we were to examine every tale of unusual conflict, we would spend eternity chasing phantoms. This is not strategy, it is hesitation masquerading as caution. The Empire thrives because we act decisively. Hesitation invites chaos, and chaos is the human's domain. The veteran, silent until now, raised his head to speak again. His tone carried none of the heat of an argument, only the weight of his experience. General, you misunderstand me. My intent is not to sell hesitation but to prepare you for what you face. Humans thrive in chaos because they are chaos incarnate. You cannot predict them, and that is what makes them dangerous. Our fleet was superior, but they found ways to turn our strength against us. The room was still as his words echoed. Xen turned to the central display, summoning holographic data of the Empire's recent reconnaissance. It displayed human settlements, scattered and vulnerable. The general gestured toward the projections. This is what you ask me to fear? Isolated colonies with inconsistent infrastructure? Their ships are decades behind ours in capability. Their population is a fraction of ours. Where is the threat in this, veteran? Where is the danger you speak of? The veteran's response was calm, deliberate. What you see is their surface. What lies beneath is what defeated us. They adapt. They endure. They turn disadvantage into opportunity. The moment you underestimate them is the moment they strike. A murmur spread through the council. Xen could see the cracks forming in their unity, the seeds of doubt planted by the veteran's words. It was unacceptable. The Empire's leadership could not afford to waver, especially in the face of such a minor opponent. He turned back to the council, his voice rising with authority. Let me remind you all of the Empire's history. We have faced countless enemies, species far more advanced and unified than these humans, and we have triumphed. Our technology is unrivaled. Our fleets are unmatched. Our discipline is unparalleled. To suggest that this fledgling species poses a legitimate threat is an insult to all we have built. The elder interjected once more, her tone measured. And yet, General, history also shows that those who dismiss the warnings of experience often pay a steep price. You may believe the humans are beneath us, but that does not mean they are harmless. Xen's patience was wearing thin. He gestured toward the holographic display again, shifting the projection to show the Empire's military might. Rows upon rows of warships, each a testament to their technological superiority, filled the screen. This is the Empire, he declared. This is what stands against the humans. They are ants before a colossus. They can adapt all they wish, but they cannot overcome this. The veteran stood, his movements slow but deliberate. His voice, though softer than Xen's, carried a gravity that silenced the room. They will not fight this head-on, General. That is not their way. They will find your weaknesses, exploit them, and turn your strength into your downfall. They will bleed you not with overwhelming force but with persistence. And when you realize what they are doing, it will already be too late. Xen's lips tightened, but he said nothing. The council was watching, their eyes darting between him and the veteran. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Xen spoke, his tone dismissive. You speak as though the humans are omnipotent, yet they are but one species among many. If they were truly as unstoppable as you claim, they would have already risen to power. Instead, they remain confined to their corner of the galaxy, fragmented and weak. Your fear blinds you, veteran. The Empire does not bow to fear. The veteran met his gaze, unyielding. Fear has nothing to do with this, General. Wisdom does. But I see now that wisdom will not sway you. You will learn, one way or another. Xen turned away, signaling the end of the discussion. This council will not be governed by the ghosts of your failures, veteran. We will move forward with strength and resolve. If the humans seek to challenge the Empire, they will be crushed as all others have been. The council began to disperse, but the unease lingered. Xen could feel it, though he refused to acknowledge it. As the veteran left the chamber, he paused at the threshold, turning back for one final remark. Remember my words, General. When the time comes, remember them. Humans are a species defined by their contradictions, a chaotic blend of weakness and strength. Physically, they are not remarkable. Their endurance is impressive for a species of their size, but they lack natural armor, heightened senses, or the strength possessed by many other sentient beings. Yet, it is precisely their apparent frailty that becomes their greatest weapon. They adapt to their environment with a speed and efficiency that defies prediction, turning the harshest conditions into opportunities for growth. Where other species rely on biological evolution over millennia, humans augment themselves with tools and technology. Their adaptability extends beyond the physical into the psychological. Faced with superior enemies, they innovate. Where their natural senses fail, they create devices to extend them. Their technological advancements occur not in smooth arcs but in unpredictable leaps, often born of desperation. They do not merely respond to challenges, they transform them into pathways to survival. Humans are not bound by a singular way of thinking. They lack the rigid hierarchies of the Galactic Empire, which should, by all logic, be a disadvantage. Yet this lack of structure becomes a strategic advantage. Without a strict reliance on centralized commands, their forces can act independently, making them highly unpredictable. What one faction lacks, another compensates for, creating a patchwork resilience that confounds more orderly opponents. Their ingenuity is matched by their resourcefulness. Humans exploit every tool at their disposal, no matter how rudimentary. During engagements with technologically superior foes, they have been known to use outdated weaponry in innovative ways, forcing more advanced adversaries to rethink their strategies. They thrive in asymmetrical warfare, using guerrilla tactics, decoys, and sabotage to neutralize technological superiority. Their capacity to repurpose civilian technology for military applications is unmatched, making every human settlement a potential hub of resistance. Humans' most unsettling quality is their emotional depth. Unlike many species, who prioritize logic and efficiency, humans are driven by a volatile mix of emotions. While this can lead to irrational decisions, it also fuels an intensity in battle that is difficult to counter. They fight not just to survive but to protect what they hold dear: family, ideals, and the intangible concept of freedom. This emotional drive gives them a persistence that often exceeds physical limitations, allowing them to endure hardships that would break more logical species. Their unity, or lack thereof, is another paradox. Humans are notorious for internal conflicts, often divided by ideology, culture, and ambition. Yet, when faced with an external threat, they exhibit an uncanny ability to unify. This unity is not imposed from above but emerges organically, driven by shared purpose and mutual necessity. This makes their alliances flexible and resilient, able to withstand pressures that would fracture more rigid coalitions. In battle, humans are tacticians of the unexpected. They are not bound by conventional strategies or rules of engagement. They learn from their mistakes quickly, adapting their tactics with each engagement. Where the Empire relies on precision and overwhelming force, humans use unpredictability and misdirection. They attack where they are least expected, retreat when it serves their purpose, and strike back with devastating precision. Their commanders often employ tactics that defy conventional logic, taking risks that no seasoned strategist would consider. Yet these risks frequently pay off because humans excel at exploiting the overconfidence of their adversaries. They turn the Empire's strength, its reliance on flawless execution and overwhelming power, into a vulnerability. By creating chaos, they force mistakes, and in that chaos, they find victory. Human warfare is not confined to the battlefield. They understand the value of psychological warfare, targeting not just the body but the mind. Their ability to manipulate perceptions, spread disinformation, and create doubt is unparalleled. They understand that a demoralized enemy is often more vulnerable than an outnumbered one. Stories of human defiance, of soldiers standing their ground against impossible odds, spread quickly, undermining the confidence of even the most disciplined foes. Their rapid technological advancement is another factor that defies conventional wisdom. Unlike the Empire, which develops technology in controlled, methodical steps, humans innovate at an almost reckless pace. They are not afraid to experiment, even when failure seems likely. This willingness to take risks allows them to leapfrog over perceived limitations, often surprising their adversaries with capabilities they were not expected to possess. This unpredictability extends beyond their technology to their very culture. Humans are storytellers, and their myths and narratives shape their strategies. They draw inspiration from their history, using lessons from ancient wars and conflicts to inform their tactics. To the Empire, these stories may seem primitive, but to humans, they are a source of strength. They believe in the power of the individual, the idea that one person can change the course of history. This belief fuels their determination, making them dangerous even in the face of overwhelming odds. Humans' adaptability and resilience are amplified by their willingness to sacrifice. They are capable of enduring great losses if it means achieving their goals. Unlike the Empire, which values efficiency and preservation, humans view sacrifice as a necessary part of survival. This mindset creates a level of commitment that is difficult to counter. They fight not just for victory but for the chance to endure and rebuild. The veteran's words had outlined these strengths with clarity, but Xen remained skeptical. He viewed humans through the lens of the Empire's metrics: strength, technology, and discipline. Yet humans operated outside those parameters. Their strength lay in their ability to defy expectations, to turn every disadvantage into an advantage. They were not bound by the rules of war that the Empire so carefully followed. They rewrote the rules with every engagement. In the end, humans are a paradox. Weak yet strong. Chaotic yet unified. Primitive yet innovative. Their true power lies in their refusal to be defined by any single trait. They are a species that thrives on contradiction, using it to overcome obstacles that should be insurmountable. To underestimate them is to invite disaster, for they will always find a way to exploit the assumptions of those who believe they are superior. General Xen wasted no time initiating preparations for the inevitable conflict. He viewed the veteran's warning as little more than an overcautious relic of a past defeat. His focus was clear, amassing the full might of the Galactic Empire to ensure a swift and decisive victory. The fleets were mobilized, an awe-inspiring display of technological superiority and military precision. Warships capable of annihilating entire planets were brought into formation, their systems optimized for coordinated strikes. The Empire's doctrine of overwhelming force would leave no room for human resistance. Strategists within the Empire began drafting invasion plans with methodical precision. Human colonies, spread across their modest territories, were mapped and analyzed for weaknesses. Supply chains, defensive structures, and communication networks were catalogued. The goal was clear: disrupt their infrastructure and neutralize their ability to retaliate. The Empire's analysts deemed the task straightforward, projecting victory within weeks of engagement. To Xen, it was simply a matter of execution. Amid the war preparations, dissent brewed quietly within the council chambers. The veteran's words had sown seeds of doubt among a few members, but these concerns were drowned out by the confidence of Xen's supporters. The general's unwavering belief in the Empire's superiority served as a rallying point for those who sought glory through conquest. For them, the war against humans was not just a military operation but a demonstration of the Empire's unchallenged dominance. The veteran, however, refused to remain silent. Despite being dismissed by Xen, he continued to voice his concerns, appealing to the more cautious members of the council. His arguments were rooted in experience, not conjecture. He warned that the Empire's reliance on brute force and predictable strategies would be its downfall against a foe as unconventional as humans. His words were met with polite acknowledgement but little action. The machinery of war was already in motion, and few were willing to risk opposing it. Xen's confidence extended to the battlefield commanders under his command. He instructed them to adhere strictly to the Empire's established protocols, confident that the precision and discipline of their forces would overpower any human resistance. The fleets were divided into strike groups, each assigned specific targets within human-controlled space. The strategy was efficient and relentless, overwhelmed the humans on multiple fronts, leaving them no time to regroup or counterattack. The plan was flawless in its design, or so Xen believed. Despite the outward show of unity, cracks began to form within the Empire's leadership. Some commanders, influenced by the veteran's warnings, quietly questioned the rigidity of Xen's strategy. They recognized the danger of underestimating an opponent known for their unpredictability. These doubts, however, were carefully concealed, as open dissent would be viewed as treason. The Empire's hierarchy left little room for alternative perspectives, even when they might prove vital. As the fleets moved into position, the humans began to respond. Reports of increased activity in human space trickled in, though their actions appeared disorganized and reactive. To Xen, this was further proof of their inferiority. Yet, beneath the surface, a more complex picture was emerging. The humans were not preparing for a conventional war. They were setting the stage for a conflict on their terms. They fortified key locations, established fallback positions, and began spreading misinformation through the Empire's communication networks. The first skirmishes unfolded as predicted. Imperial forces encountered minimal resistance, dismantling human defenses with ease. The early victories bolstered Xen's confidence, validating his belief in the Empire's invincibility. However, as the campaign progressed, the humans' true capabilities began to surface. Their tactics became increasingly erratic, forcing Imperial forces to adapt on the fly. Supply lines were targeted with precision, cutting off vital resources. Guerrilla strikes disrupted operations in unexpected ways, creating confusion and sowing doubt among the Empire's ranks. Xen dismissed these disruptions as minor setbacks, attributing them to the desperation of a defeated enemy. He refused to alter his strategy, convinced that his overwhelming force would eventually crush all resistance. Yet, the longer the conflict dragged on, the more evident it became that the humans were not simply reacting, they were dictating the terms of engagement. They exploited the Empire's reliance on predictable patterns, turning the rigid structure of its forces into a liability. The veterans' warnings echoed louder as the Empire's progress slowed. Casualties began to mount, not from large-scale battles but from countless small skirmishes that chipped away at the Empire's strength. Morale among the troops faltered as they faced an enemy that seemed to appear and vanish at will. The humans' ability to strike where they were least expected created a pervasive sense of vulnerability, even among the Empire's most seasoned warriors. Within the Council, the growing list of setbacks prompted renewed debates. Some members began to openly question Xen's leadership, suggesting that the Empire's approach needed to adapt to the unique challenge posed by the humans. The veteran seized the opportunity to push his message further, arguing that the Empire's reliance on overwhelming force was not only ineffective but dangerous. He called for a reassessment of the Empire's strategy, urging the Council to consider alternative approaches. Xen, however, remained defiant. He viewed the criticisms as an affront to his authority and doubled down on his strategy. His pride would not allow him to admit the possibility of error. To him, altering the plan was a sign of weakness, and weakness was unacceptable in the face of an inferior opponent. He dismissed the dissenting voices as cowards, unwilling to commit fully to the Empire's cause. The human resistance continued to evolve, their tactics becoming more sophisticated with each engagement. They exploited every opportunity to disrupt the Empire's operations, from infiltrating communication networks to sabotaging key installations. Their ability to adapt outpaced the Empire's ability to counter, creating a dynamic that the Empire's rigid hierarchy struggled to address. The war, which Xen had promised would be swift, was becoming a drawn-out campaign that drained resources and morale. The veteran's final appeal to the Council was a stark warning. He spoke of the long-term consequences of underestimating the humans, not just for the war but for the Empire itself. He argued that the humans' resilience and adaptability posed a threat that could not be defeated through conventional means. He warned that the longer the conflict persisted, the more likely it was that the Empire would find itself in a position it could not recover from. Xen dismissed the veteran's words once more, but the doubt within the Council was growing. The seeds of dissent had taken root, and the cracks in the Empire's unity were becoming harder to ignore. While the war was far from over, it was clear that the Empire was no longer in control of the narrative. The humans had achieved what the veteran had predicted. They had turned the Empire's strength into a vulnerability, forcing them to fight on terms they were ill-equipped to handle. The humans had begun their preparations, not with displays of military might, but with calculated, deliberate measures. Intelligence reports showed movements that appeared scattered, even disorganized, but those who analyzed the patterns closely noticed a deeper logic. Supply chains were reinforced, evacuation protocols enacted, and defensive structures enhanced with unorthodox ingenuity. Their strength did not lie in centralized coordination but in their decentralized resilience. Each colony became a node in a web of defiance, connected by shared purpose rather than rigid hierarchy. General Xen, observing the reports, dismissed these developments as the flailing efforts of a desperate species. He viewed their actions as confirmation of the Empire's superiority, a species clinging to survival against an unstoppable force. Orders were issued to accelerate the campaign, ensuring that human defenses would crumble under the weight of the Empire's relentless advance. The fleets moved with precision, cutting through human territories, targeting key colonies and infrastructure. Yet, with every move, the humans seemed to anticipate the Empire's actions. The first signs of strategic disarray became apparent when logistical reports from the front lines showed unexplained delays. Human forces, though vastly outnumbered, had launched a series of coordinated strikes on the Empire's supply routes. These operations were not grand battles but targeted disruptions, creating bottlenecks that slowed the Empire's advance. The humans exploited terrain and environmental conditions to their advantage, choosing battlefields that neutralized the Empire's technological edge. Every setback, though minor on its own, accumulated into a growing obstacle that disrupted the Empire's carefully planned timeline. Among the Empire's ranks, frustration began to grow. Commanders accustomed to swift victories found themselves facing an opponent that refused to engage on predictable terms. Human forces would strike and retreat, their movements erratic and difficult to counter. Communications were infiltrated, misinformation spread, and critical operations compromised. The humans wielded asymmetry as a weapon, forcing the Empire to react rather than act. Within the Galactic Council, the veteran's warnings gained renewed attention. Members who had once dismissed his words began to question the Empire's strategy. The losses were mounting, not in catastrophic battles but in the slow erosion of the Empire's resources and morale. The Council debated fiercely, with some urging a reconsideration of tactics while others clung to Xen's promise of inevitable victory. The divide widened as the war dragged on, creating fractures within the Empire's leadership. The humans, meanwhile, continued to evolve their approach. Their technological advancements, though seemingly crude compared to the Empire's, were applied with remarkable efficiency. Civilian tools were repurposed into weapons, infrastructure into fortifications. They demonstrated an uncanny ability to learn from each encounter, adapting their defenses and tactics to counter the Empire's strategies. It became clear that the humans were not simply defending themselves, they were preparing to shift the balance of power. As the conflict escalated, psychological warfare became a central element of the human strategy. Propaganda spread through the Empire's networks, planting seeds of doubt among its forces. Stories of human resilience, acts of defiance against overwhelming odds, and whispered rumors of hidden strengths reached the ears of Imperial soldiers. Morale wavered, and the once unshakable confidence of the Empire's forces began to erode. Soldiers who had believed in the inevitability of their victory found themselves questioning their role in a war that no longer seemed so certain. General Xen, still unwavering in his resolve, doubled down on his strategy. He dismissed the setbacks as anomalies, insisting that the Empire's overwhelming power would eventually crush all resistance. His orders became increasingly rigid, his focus solely on maintaining control of the narrative. Yet, the more he sought to tighten his grip, the more the situation spiraled beyond his command. The humans thrived in the chaos he refused to acknowledge, turning his rigidity into a weakness. The turning point came when a coordinated human operation targeted one of the Empire's primary staging areas. Using decoys and misinformation, they lured Imperial forces into a trap that crippled a significant portion of the fleet. The loss was a blow not just to the Empire's military strength but to its perception of invincibility. The humans had demonstrated their ability to inflict meaningful damage, and the psychological impact on the Empire's forces was profound. Within the Council, the divisions reached a breaking point. The veteran's warnings were no longer dismissed as paranoia but viewed as prescient. He argued that the Empire's failure to adapt was the root cause of its struggles. The humans were not winning because of superior technology or numbers but because they understood the nature of the conflict in a way the Empire refused to acknowledge. His voice, once solitary, now found allies among those who had grown disillusioned with Xen's leadership. Xen, however, remained defiant. To admit error was to admit weakness, and he refused to do so. He insisted that victory was still within reach, that the setbacks were temporary, and the humans' defiance merely prolonging the inevitable. He viewed the Council's growing dissent as a challenge to his authority, further entrenching his position. His refusal to adapt became a symbol of the Empire's inability to reconcile its principles with the realities of the war. The humans, emboldened by their successes, began to shift the momentum further. They launched a series of counteroffensives, targeting vulnerable points in the Empire's supply chains and communication networks. Each operation, though small in scale, inflicted outsized damage, forcing the Empire to divert resources to address the growing instability. The once coordinated advance became a patchwork of reactive measures, each one undermining the Empire's overarching strategy. The veteran's final address to the Council was both a warning and a plea. He spoke not of battles but of the Empire's future, arguing that the humans represented more than a military threat. Their ability to adapt and persevere posed a challenge to the Empire's very identity. He warned that the war, if continued on its current path, would not end in victory but in mutual destruction. His words resonated with those who had come to see the truth of his perspective, but Xen remained unmoved.